Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if your lab setup is holding back your science projects? This new paper is all about that. Imagine your science lab as a complex system. This new research gives us a cool new way to think about how all the pieces in a lab work together to help us understand human behavior and the brain. For a long time, science worked by looking at one small piece at a time, like studying just one button on a complex machine. But as we learn more, we realize that human behavior is way more connected and dynamic than that. Think about how your body and mind work together. It is not just one thing at a time. Scientists themselves are saying that looking at things in isolation just isn't cutting it anymore. They're calling for new ways to study complex systems. This paper agrees, but it points out a blind spot. While we've gone better at thinking about theories, measuring things, and analyzing data, we haven't paid enough attention to the place where the data comes from the lab itself. Think about it. Often lab equipment is like a bunch of separate tools in different boxes. They don't always talk to each other easily. This limits the kinds of big questions we can even ask, no matter how smart our analysis tools are. So, what did these researchers do? They came up with a new way to think about laboratory infrastructure. They call it an epistemic framework. That is a fancy way of saying a way to understand how we gain knowledge from our measurements. They propose we think about measurements in 3 layers. It is like peeling an onion to get to the core. The first layer is the surface layer. This is the raw number that comes out of your instrument. For example, a number from a sensor that measures your skin's electrical activity. It is just a number, like how much your hand is sweating, but it is not the whole story. The second layer is the proxy layer. This is where we interpret that raw number as something more meaningful, like the activity of a specific body system. So that skin sweat measurement might be a proxy for what is called sympathetic nervous system activity, which is related to things like stress or excitement. It is an indicator, but it is not the thing itself. The third layer is the target layer. This is the big interesting thing we actually want to understand. Things like working memory capacity, arousal, or how much effort someone is putting in. These are the big concepts that motivate our research. The key idea is that there is often a gap or a loss between these layers. We measure sweat surface layer as a proxy for how our nervous system is reacting. Proxy layer to understand how aroused someone is target layer. But maybe the sweat also depends on the room temperature or how much sleep someone got. The measurement isn't the perfect one-to-one match to what we really care about. That is why they say we don't care how much you sweat, because the sweat itself isn't the final answer. So, how does this help us improve our labs? They translate these layers into 7 practical qualities for lab infrastructure. These are things like how precisely our devices capture signals, how well those signals actually represent the real thing, and how well all our different devices can work together. One of these is temporal alignment and event marking. This is basically making sure that all your different data streams are perfectly timed up. If you are measuring brain activity while someone is playing a game, you need to know exactly when a specific event in the game happened and how it relates to their brainwaves. Another important one is interoperability and multimodal integration. This means how well your different devices can talk to each other. Can your EEG machine and your eye tracker share data seamlessly to answer more complex questions? They also emphasize transparency, metadata, and documented processing. This means being able to see exactly how the data was collected and processed. If a software automatically calculates something like eye blinks without letting you see the raw eye movement data, it limits what you can do with it later. And finally, flexibility and reuse. The idea is that your lab should be adaptable, science changes, and we want our labs to be able to handle new questions and new technologies in the future. To make this even more practical, they even suggest a rating scheme like an ABC grading for your lab's infrastructure in these different areas. It helps researchers evaluate and improve their labs. Let's look at a real example they give. Imagine a study on how physical effort and attention work together. You might have a program to give stimuli and record responses, a bike to measure physical effort, and a heart rate monitor. Even with these common tools, there can be problems. For example, some heart rate monitors might only give you an average heart rate per minute, losing important details about how your heart rate changes from beat to beat. This is a loss of fidelity at the proxy layer. Also, if the computer talking to the bike and the computer talking to the heart rate monitor can't perfectly sync their data, you can't precisely link a specific game event to a specific heart rate change. This makes it hard to study the dynamic interplay between effort and attention. Their ideal setup uses something called lab streaming layer, a tool that helps devices communicate in real time. This allows for much more complex and adaptive experiments where the system can respond to what the participant is doing or feeling feeling right now. This whole framework is super important because it shifts our focus from individual instruments to the lab as a whole. It's about how the whole system supports the research questions you want to ask. Now, what does this mean for us, the curious public? Well, it suggests that to truly understand complex human behaviors, like why we procrastinate or how we perform under pressure, we need labs that are set up to capture that complexity. It's not just about having the fanciest gadgets, but about how they work together. This research highlights that good infrastructure is a foundation for good science. It is like having the right tools and making sure they're all connected and working in harmony. Without that, even the most brilliant researchers might be limited in the kinds of discoveries they can make. The authors are also clear that even the best lab infrastructure won't automatically do the science for you. You still need skilled researchers, good experimental designs, and smart analysis. But this framework helps ensure that the material conditions are right, so those skilled researchers can ask and answer the most interesting questions. In my opinion, this is a really valuable contribution. It bridges the gap between the technical details of lab equipment and the big exciting questions in psychology and neuroscience. It's a call to think holistically about how we do science in the lab. They've given us a practical way to evaluate our scientific environments. And I think that is going to help drive better research in the future. The idea of those 3 layers: surface, proxy, and target is a really intuitive way to unpack what we're really measuring. And the 7 infrastructure properties are concrete things to look for. What I think is particularly strong is the emphasis on flexibility and reuse. Science is always evolving, and labs that are built like concrete boxes for one specific type of experiment will likely become outdated quickly. A modular, interoperable lab is much more future-proof. The limitations, as the authors acknowledge, are mainly practical and financial. Building or upgrading a lab to meet these ideal criteria can be expensive and complex. Also, some research questions might require specific, specialized equipment that doesn't easily fit into a multimodal setup. For example, studying certain rare neural processes might require a highly specialized, isolated setup that sacrifices some interoperability. The paper itself doesn't offer specific tool recommendations, which they correctly leave to modality experts. Looking ahead, I'd love to see more community efforts build on this framework. Perhaps specific toolkits or software that help labs achieve higher ratings in these 7 categories, or case studies showing how labs have successfully implemented these ideas. This research reminds us that the physical environment where science happens is just as important as the ideas and the people. It is a great step towards making our labs better equipped to understand the complexities of the human mind and body. So, what do you think? Ever feel like your tools are limiting your potential? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, give us a like and subscribe for more insights from RUBIN'S Mind Lab. Thanks for watching.